I have the pleasure and honor of introducing our speaker, Jay Adson, and I'm grateful that he is here. Thank you, Jay, for coming. You may know Jay. There he is. Even though you haven't met him personally, the odds are really high that you've been touched by something that he's done. This is a special day for Jay, by the way. 20 years ago this week, Jay graduated from COM with a degree in broadcasting and film. He told me while he was here, though, that he would, in his words, he would sneak across the street to take computer science courses, which was his concentration. So, and keep in mind, this was 1992, back in the dark ages, when the internet was mostly used by the Pentagon and 7 guys in Steve Jobs' garage who hacked into it. It was, really in its infancy. When Jay went to California, his idea was he was going to be an audio engineer. That's how he started up. But while he was still in his 20s, I think 27 or so, he started an internet company it's now called Equinix. And that is to the internet, sort of to make a rough, very humble analogy, what Kenmore Square is to the Green Line. It's where all the different routes intersect, but it's figured out so that the trains don't pile into each other. Well, Equinix is now, I don't know, a gazillion-dollar company, really multi-billion-dollar company, because of what his innovative idea was. And then he started Digg. Most of you probably know Digg, right? Social networking gathers every day. You can go there and see what the news is, and you can vote on what you think is important, and it rates the news. One of the earliest of the social networking sites. And a lot of others. Simple Geo, which is location-based, when you use Foursquare and try to understand where you are and where other people are. And most recently, Revision 3, which was a web-based, essentially television-style programming, which we just found out was bought last week by the Discovery Channel. So, Jay is the sort of guy who's become really adept at starting companies and growing those companies. He even has his own show on the web called Ask Jay, which you could obviously Google and go to and see him. It's kind of like, for the parents there mostly, this is like car talk for entrepreneurs who need advice. And that's, people call up, and Jay gives them advice about how to be an entrepreneur. How cool is Jay? He was featured on the cover of Time magazine's top 100 most influential people in the world. Think about that, right? Yeah. Now, I think we could look over all of the schools and colleges here at BU, and I don't know that there's any other graduate of any other school who's been in Time magazine's top 100 most influential people in the world. So Jay is one of ours, and those are the footsteps that you're going to be following in. And after Jay's early successes, he moved to New York, small town in New York, where he was preparing himself to teach high school, and that's what he's still working on. He says he's determined to get a teaching certificate, which is what his parents were. They are also teachers. So in many ways, this is the spirit that Horace Mann, I think, talked about when he said to go out and achieve a victory for humanity. So please welcome our distinguished alumnus, Jay Adson.
Thank you, Dean Fiedler, for that generous introduction. And most of all, congratulations, class of 2012. You did it. Thank you. Now, when I was invited here today, of course, I was deeply honored. But I was also scared. In fact, scared doesn't even really do it justice. I was terrified. I am terrified. But I often feel this way. It's something I've become accustomed to. It's an old enemy I don't mind so much anymore. It's a voice inside my head, and it's one that I was born with, and it repeats itself over and over again. It says, I am not qualified. I've heard that voice in so many moments. Glass exploding before my eyes as a desperate internet entrepreneur throws a chair through a window in a last-ditch effort to run power cables to internet equipment during a massive power failure. I heard that voice then. I am not qualified. reviewing security while standing within a cinematically lit 250,000 square foot building that I built, nothing but blinking cages of equipment, rack after rack of thousands of machines set up for services lost in the World Trade Center attack. I am so not qualified. In Washington, D.C., at the Capitol, in the Rayburn office building, testifying before Congress, C-SPAN cameras rolling, staring up at United States Congress people, I am definitely not qualified. Standing in a conference room, speaking into a speakerphone on the first earnings call of a public company, I am not qualified. Looking into the eyes of my wife, Brenda, reciting my vows of marriage, or holding a newborn child so small and vulnerable and looking into her eyes, I am not qualified. Or at a coffee shop, drinking a cup with President Brown and later Dean Fiedler, discussing this speech. It occurs to me that the administration here might actually check my college transcript. Oh crap, I'm really not qualified. Well, when Dean Fiedler asked me to speak to you, I remembered hearing that voice in my head louder than ever 20 years ago to this day. It was the day that I graduated from Comm, in my own cap and gown, sitting essentially where you are, although we were in a parking lot, but never mind that. Today, I want to talk to you about that voice and how it relates to how we define success for ourselves. I want to talk to you about this because I wish to God someone had taken a few minutes out of their day to talk to me about this in the spring of 1992. I wish that on that day, in any one of the speeches that I heard, someone had just given me a tiny bit of clarity about that voice and how it distracts us from our passion, and how passion ultimately is tied to a more meaningful existence and the true definition of success. After all, it's what you all want, right? To feel successful? That voice was really distracting me that day, and I'm sure it was for many others as well. I still get angry about things like this. I don't like it when answers or opinions that could help us are kept behind closed doors or locked away in smoke-filled back rooms. To be honest, I don't like secrets. If you track my history, despite the entrepreneurship, my reputation has suffered a bit because I tend to enjoy revealing truths that some people have felt, probably for competitive reasons, weren't, quote, appropriate for everyone. So I'm going to spend some time on one of those concepts today. And here it is. The traditional definition of being qualified is bullshit. The truth is, the only thing you're qualified for, the only thing you're really qualified for, is what you are deeply, at your core, passionate about. Think about what moves you. Think about why you came to this school to study this field. Think about the dreams you had, maybe as a young child. They don't have to be tied to wealth or fame, although maybe that's something you were passionate about. Maybe it was freedom, or having an audience, or having a chance. Today, when you leave here, there will be paths to follow, some annoying, some bureaucratic, and there will be people who will be in the way of what you want to achieve. But that's all trivial. What I'm here to tell you is that if you tap into that dream core that drives you, other people around you will see it. Your boss will see it. Your peers will see it. Even the bureaucrats will see it, and they will all move out of your way. Even better, many will get behind you as you march ahead. Want to be qualified? Create with passion, and people will notice you, accept you, and follow you. Create with passion, and you will not only scale corporate ladders, but they will disappear. Create with passion, and paths will become manageable, and you will even make your own. Create with passion, and hurdles will become challenges, and in problems, you will see solutions. In the end, it's your passion, not your ability to follow rules, that will qualify you. So, the problem. The problem is that, you're going to be distracted by this. And you know the distraction that I'm talking about. It's the one that says I'm not qualified. It's the one that says this is what society wants you to be. You see, it's a mind game. It's how we're all told to perceive the world and how, if you change your perspective, doors will open. Now, don't get me wrong. These distractions are about how we traditionally define qualification and success, and they are very real. These distractions often lead to success in others' eyes, or maybe financial ends, but ironically, can lead you away from a personal feeling of success. That's how the writer becomes an editor and stops writing, or a painter or curator and stops painting. Maybe a filmmaker becomes an investor and stops filming, or a communicator managing communicators. I'm not saying that these are bad things, but they're sometimes unnecessary. Yeah, I remember May of 1992. I was sweating in my cap and gown, thinking about how I had to go through this graduation ceremony, mostly for the sake of my mother and father. You know, I was nervous because my anxious parents were probably going to ask me what sort of work I might be doing after I graduate. And I dreaded that exchange. It turned out it wasn't nearly as bad as I thought. My grandmother had no idea what a film degree meant. And my parents probably secretly thought I'd end up in the computer business. So most of the weekend was spent focused on the tactics of where I might live and how I might pay for it. I admit it, I really had no idea what I was going to do next, or where I would live, or frankly, what to tell anyone about it. I did, however, have one amazing competitive advantage walking away from graduation day. I knew what made me passionate. I get excited, nerd level, obsessive fanboy level excited about enabling new forms of communication between people. And I don't mean long-distance phone calls or free text messages. I mean giving voices to masses of people who once were silent, and giving other masses of people access to those voices. I always knew that the arts and technologies that achieved this, such as filmmaking or the internet, got me weirdly hot and bothered, leaving my friends and colleagues looking at me funny for years, and many of them still do. But that's just me, and perhaps I'm guilty of a little 20/20 hindsight here. I know that in inflection points in your life, like the one you're going through right now, it's much easier to look back on and make sense of later than it is to live through it now. I get that. And in any case, making sense of it all, creating meaning, finding your passion, isn't something that necessarily comes naturally. It's hard sometimes to look at yourself objectively. However, if you can do some self-searching now, as I did in 1992, you can avoid some wasted time. And it will give you the ticket to taking the necessary risks to be the greatest generation of leaders and innovators this world has ever known. So, the late author David Foster Wallace, in an inspiring speech in 2005, said, "Pay attention to yourself." Learning how to think, he said, is learning how to construct meaning from experience. If you cannot exercise this choice in adult life, you will be totally hosed. Hosed is bad. Hosed is not qualified. So instead of hosed, try today, as David suggested, to take a truly objective view of the series of experiences you've had up until this point. How do you perceive those experiences? And are there patterns in them that point to your passion? Do this without using traditional categories. That's your starting game. In 1992, there was no internet, and there was no convergence of filmmaking and computer graphics, and there was no social media. I had no terms to define my particular passion for communication at that time. So I came up with my own definition in my head, and I measured my choices based on whether or not they met my own standards. Even pushing a broom for a production company or serving coffee to a telecommunications executive, was it on the thread of my passion? Success is an odd thing. It starts with walking and talking and shitting in the right place and not making an ass out of yourself when you're around other people. And our success, as put forth by our parents, is largely centered on how well we operate within structures. It starts with the womb, and then swaddling, where we feel more comfortable, confined, wrapped tightly in a blanket, taken care of, free of risk, all warm and cuddly. But the structures never stop. Later, it takes the form of grades. Soon, social groups in school and friendship circles begin to dominate. Popularity now defines our success. Then, hierarchical ascent in the workplace. public recognition. Who knows, you may even end up on the cover of Time magazine. The problem with all of this, to be blunt, is that success it's almost always defined completely by other people. Am I qualified? Am I successful? I don't know. Better go ask other people. Well, you are here right now graduating from this place because you challenge assumptions in the status quo. You are unwilling to accept measurement of yourself defined by others. You already have the building blocks to define success a different way for yourself based on passion. Now, I'm not here with a magic process that will have you looking inward and suddenly finding the meaning of life. Not that you could get it from a speech anyway. For what it's worth, when I graduated, the commencement speech was delivered by Mr. Rogers, the children's television genius. The entire student population of Boston University stood up and sang, "It's a beautiful day in this neighborhood." Really, we all had t-shirts that said, "It's a beautiful day in this neighborhood." It was awesome. It didn't exactly relieve any anxiety, though. Anyway, I'd like to tell you just a few of my experiences that I hope can illustrate that following your own passion and not someone else's or society's will for sure lead to a feeling of qualification and success, because that's the prize, right? Well, when I applied to BU in the late 1980s, I knew I had a love of radio and film, but I was also fascinated by the online world, which was a very secret universe at the time. In my day, a mere passing interest in this stuff required such a level of geekiness that you had to do it in private. So, to avoid being beaten up regularly in high school, I chose to wear filmmaking and radio on my sleeve and keep the whole playing with computers all night part to myself. Because of the traditional structures and exposure to media that presented success as making money and climbing a corporate ladder, I was deeply troubled about being able to afford eating when I finally graduated. No one I knew was able to make a living from any of my interests, such as sound post-production or worse, hacking and freaking on computers. So in the end, as I sat where you are now, I wondered what I might do to fulfill these passions while still earning a living. Now, there was something else happening at the time, and it was important to how I saw the world. A couple of years earlier, a bunch of students at Peking University and other universities in China were using computers to communicate and organize themselves. You guys had the Arab Spring. For me, it was Tiananmen Square. A photo we all saw on television while here at BU was of a lone man standing in the path of a line of tanks. It was a photo that moved the world. Now, one curious thing, however, was that China had historically been extremely good at controlling and suppressing information flow. So how did students organize? And news of the protests spread so fast? Well, the answer, my hipster friends, was the predecessor to Twitter, something us old people call email. The university there in China was connected to the nascent internet, and messages originally intended to organize local students moved at the speed of light to the hungry press corps here in the United States until the Chinese government caught on and shut it down. No reels of film needed to pass the border. No recordings had to be secreted through a checkpoint. Just email messages moving at the speed of light. No borders, no limits, changing the world. This idea fascinated me. Disintermediated communication is a ridiculously powerful force. But pocket that for a minute. Back to finding a job after graduation. San Francisco, 1992. After a year taking little film jobs that appealed to the geek in me, I've had a friend here at BU who calls me one afternoon with a job lead. He was helping to start a company that would connect consumers to the internet for real, for the first time. No, really, I mean it, for the first time. They had written some crazy new software that made it so you can connect your computer to the internet directly. In the past, you needed a college account, as the internet really wasn't commercialized yet. My friend had no idea what they'd use it for, but he figured I might be interested in helping out. So I go into the interview with the founder and CEO. This is the guy who threw the chair through the window, and he looked like Fred Flintstone on meth. Anyway, he asked me why he should hire a guy with a film degree to connect people to the internet. The poor guy heard me go on and on about how I felt it was all so important, the internet. All he wanted was a kid with common sense to manage the installations, which were pretty complicated back then. He wanted someone who could finally be more socially capable than the comic book store guy from The Simpsons. Now, was I that kid? Suddenly I heard that voice again. I am not qualified. I wasn't a telecom guy. But in every job I did for that man, driving a truck, talking to customers, working in the shipping room where we shipped out routers and modems to people, I found something to get excited about. If I was in the mailroom, I'd hang up my favorite film posters, play music, change the mood, maybe organize gatherings. Next thing you know, I'm the supervisor. Then I'm the manager, then director. I didn't ask for these promotions. I just get passionate, connecting what I was doing, however menial, to the ultimate goal, mass adoption of this medium, to set free all these repressed voices. All this intensity in me. It's why when I watched the CEO throw a chair through a window to keep the internet online, I understood. This was his passion as well. We had helped the world leapfrog closer to what my dreams of all of this could become. So was I qualified? I don't know. I do know that the lesson about defining success for myself was reinforced, and things were beginning to happen in my favor. Other older employees in the company would tell me about how they were climbing the corporate ladder, hitting their goals, meeting their metrics. They had money. Some had seniority even, but they were such unhappy souls. They would get bored. And eventually, their employees would get bored because dispassionate individuals breed dispassion. So eventually, everyone would move on. This is perfectly characterized in Mike Judge's film Office Space, where the lead character is hypnotized into only pursuing his passion while the other confused employees of Initech stare at him in dumbfounded awe. It's a story near and dear to my heart, and it speaks truth. If you haven't seen it, I highly encourage you to watch. Meanwhile, someone at Digital Equipment Corporation, a gigantic company based out here that built a lot of the early internet components, he had heard about me and what he diplomatically called my intensity. His name was Al Avery, and he hired me at Digg to build this internet airport with a group of researchers in Palo Alto, a project designed to make it possible for the internet to scale, one that would allow all of these new companies and websites and networks to connect to each other, the inter part of the internet. This was totally aligned with my passion. I won't go into details, but it was a nutty idea. I had to convince every telephone company in the world to spend about $15 million per city trenching dark fiber into the same room. Crazy, right? The room was another problem, because the room or building had to be terrorist-proof, have power all the time, and somehow be cool enough to be interesting to work in for hours at a time. Qualified? I was a film guy who was sort of beginning to work in tech. So no way, right? Furthermore, if there ever was a company that exemplified that Office Space sense of passion repression, it was Digg, which at the time had 120,000 employees. On my first day, I kid you not, they handed me a book about 30 pages thick that contained nothing more than 3-letter acronyms for business functions within the company. But my experiences up to this point reminded me to ignore these bureaucratic structures. Besides, if I was going to build an internet airport, I wanted it to look like Mission Impossible. I wanted sliding glass doors, ominous signage, biometric scanners, and lots of blinking lights. Real-life special effects. With money from Digg, I could do it passionately, and I did it, and the clients loved it. I would have stayed there forever like a pig in mud, but like previous experiences where I was passionate, I ended up on someone's radar. A few venture capitalists noticed what I was doing, and with Al's help, we decided to found our own company that did this and built these airports around the world. The telephone companies and large internet companies figured it out, and in the first few years, we raised more than $1 billion to do it and took it public. And the investors caught on. And 15 years later, that company is now worth over $10 billion, and 80% of the world's internet traffic worldwide depends on these interconnection buildings. So, was I starting to feel qualified? Nope. Over and over again, I would have these experiences. I'd get deeply excited about something, and things just seemed to fall into place. My next big adventure started this way. I was sitting in an airplane next to a woman from a developing country. I think it was in South America. And she was talking about the meaning of a free press and how in countries like hers, the press was controlled by the state, so the headlines became meaningless. Protesters were gassed and beaten, but it wouldn't even make the front page. Without a communication mechanism, nothing could move forward. I asked her about citizen journalism, and she said, Blogs are meaningless because no one knows they're there. It's like someone clapping in the desert and no one has access to the internet. I knew the mobile and infrastructure communities were fast solving the global access problem, but the other issue she raised, the one about no one hearing a tree fall in the forest, got me to thinking about a problem with search engines, apropos, and news on the internet. Historically, we depended on editors to decide what news was meant for us to see. However, what if there was another way? If someone got it right, could we have many or thousands of Tiananmen squares, thousands of blogs becoming visible from the inside of countries where the press is not free? When I had the chance to partner up with others who shared my excitement and launch a company that might address the core of these issues, exposing people to content that the public decided was appropriate versus centralized control, I leaped at the opportunity. The thing was, I went here to BU for film and broadcasting, not journalism. I knew little of the publishing or press industry. I was not qualified. I could tell you how the internet worked and how to build these things to keep it working. I could even shoot a documentary about it, but that was about it. But when the time came to raise money and start this new business, the passion leaked out of me. And people saw it. People could sense there was something interesting in there. And I spent the next 6 years working on this project known as Digg. It was a wild ride. Thank you. Many of you are old enough to have used Digg and witnessed its impact on communications. But like everything, it had its time, and it paved the way for other democratizing mediums, empowering individuals and crowds, something very inspiring today. And when the day came that I knew the company would be forced away from areas that I was passionate about, it was time to move on. Simple as that. And finally, one more quick take. The story goes like this, going all the way back to my time here at BU. Remember, film and broadcasting had inspired me. The idea of combining the effects of filmmaking and how it communicates to the masses via democratized internet, now that's something really interesting. And I was talking about it all the time with friends over beers back in 2004. It seemed to me if we could only get people to consume videos on the internet, crazy thought, with content that was actually designed for that purpose, other sets of media giants, currently with their own centralized group, who are telling us what to watch, would be disintermediated. They would be disempowered by disintermediation. I love that word. It's such a lovely word. Anyway, all the content would have no censorship, no restrictions, and with audiences assembled globally, anywhere, anytime. My friends, they encouraged me to do something about this, but I heard that voice again. I am not qualified. I hadn't been working in the film industry since I was just out of school. Yet when I discussed the idea with friends and some investors, they heard my passion. And indeed, I heard my own passion, and we mutually convinced each other to just give it a shot. So in the spring of the next year, I founded my own television station, one based entirely on the internet called Revision 3. I had no idea what I was doing. Remember, there was no YouTube yet. There wasn't even an iTunes video download store or whatever. It was really tough. It was rough going. We had to make the content and figure out ways to distribute it online. And the whole thing, though, it was infectious. Television professionals, folks who helped build popular cable networks, heard my pitch and they jumped on board. And these guys actually knew what they were doing. And so, despite my feelings of inadequacy, they taught me. Anyway, so after the many bumps along the road, my excitement to simply be in play, doing something that I loved, made me feel successful. Revision 3 went on, kept going, went on to attract millions of dedicated viewers, and was just sold to Discovery Channel last week. We proved that it could be done. And now traditional media wants to replicate it. That, ladies and gentlemen, is what passion can lead to. Now, I know my story is not of interest to all of you. The techies and geeks there might love it. The internet people might find it interesting. Budding entrepreneurs might feel they can learn a thing or three. But the truth is, I haven't told you all this because I think you'll all be thrilled by my sharing stories about the birth of the internet or evolution of mass communications, or even because my story is probably relevant to an industry that many of you are about to become part of. I'm telling you this simply to share how my route to success, to qualification, was driven by passion, not other people's definition of success, and certainly not by corporate ass-kissing. So know this, when you go in front of a boss or an investor and start talking about an idea that really inspires you, and you combine the gifts of communication that you received here at this school, you will have a force so compelling that weird, unexpected things will happen. I guarantee it. If you're an entrepreneur, people will write you checks. If you're a hiring manager, recruiting will be a breeze. If you're a storyteller, people will listen. If you're interviewing for a job, you'll get hired. And if you're pitching a film, someone will stop to think about it. What's critical is that you identify your passion and express it as you can in any job you take, however menial. Do so, and the path will appear before you. Yes, it's true. I am not qualified, at least by other people's measurements, but that's okay. I don't care about other people's measures. My success is based on going for it. It's about finding what moves me and just jumping in. And when you're a leader, no one gives a shit about qualifications anyway, because you're the one making change. Thank you. Now, thank you. Now, you go change the world because you know you're qualified. Thank you very much.